Today we have this toy lightsaber which doesn't respond to button presses, at least when it's not plugged in. It's also supposed to light up a light on this cable when it's charging, and so when you plug it in, it's supposed to light up on the cable and be charging, and nothing seems to happen. But when it is plugged in, it responds to the button and will run. And so the light turns on and it's drawing power, but the only power to it comes from this USB charging cable. So obviously something's not right. I think it's limited to either the battery or the connection between the battery and the circuit board, or maybe some of the power electronics on the circuit board. But it's relatively nicely put together. It looks like it has some grub screws holding things in place, and it also has a tail piece that unscrews. So we're going to try to take this thing apart, see what we can see. You can see in here there's a little speaker, and I can even see what looks like the end of a battery in the end of this thing. I don't think anything's just going to fall out, so I'm going to start taking off grub screws. This is a 2mm hex bit here, so I'm going to take off some grub screws and see what we can find out. So these two here were longer. This one up here is a shorter one. And there's one at a 90-degree angle. That's also a short one. And looks like there's another one across from it. Is also short. So the 3, 4 at the top. The 4 at the top are short. The 2 on the back are long. It looks like the 2 in the back were holding some type of circuit board in place. When I pushed in on the button, it went in and down slightly. And it looks like I can slide a circuit board out. There we go. All right. So, the sum component of this device is a speaker, a motion sensitive spring switch, a push button, a jack, and a couple of microcontrollers hidden underneath this thing. The battery does appear to be plugged in. I have to get a multimeter. It's a 3.7 volt 18650 cell. So let's just take a look with the circuit board out here. Alright, well, I guess it's time to get a multimeter and check the battery. There does appear to be some type of maybe a circuit board on the side of the battery, so it might have a BMS built in. It might have turned itself off or failed. So we will have to check the voltage of the battery, see how that does. We have a multimeter. I brought 2 really tiny resistors just to use their wires as an improvised plug to try to get voltage sensing off of this guy. So that'll give me something to, well, I don't want to touch them to each other, that's for sure. That will give me something to try and pull a voltage off of. basically almost nothing. So it does appear that there's a problem with the battery unit, which is kind of what I diagnosed. So 18650 batteries are pretty common and easy to replace. However, it has something uncommon on the side of it here, because that lump isn't normal for an 18650 battery. So I'm going to have to take that apart and see what that is. Okay, so we're going to have to split the protective plastic. And yes, it is a circuit board of some sort. Alright, we are going to have to take off this foam that makes the battery fit appropriately. Alright, so we have an 18650 battery, which is kind of interesting because the markings on it were on the outside of the heat shrink on it, but there's no markings on the inside, and it looks like it has a BMS board built onto it. Let's check the battery outside of the BMS board. Okay, now look at that. That's interesting. So the battery has 3.43 volts. So it looks like the cell is just fine, but the BMS board is not sending any current out. So the BMS is shut off or broken. And unfortunately, I don't know if that BMS is strictly required or not. A lot of times, these cables will have a voltage regulator built in, and they will charge only up to a voltage. So this one here says input 5 volts, and the output is 3.6 volts to 3.7 volts. So theoretically, this will charge and stop charging this guy appropriately. So you don't really need a BMS to prevent it from being charged. Overcharged, I should say. It's really there for an overcurrent protection, and with a speaker and a LED, you're really not going to have a lot of overcurrent happening. So my initial thought is to bypass this BMS board. The downside is that it may potentially allow this guy to be overcharged if they're relying on that BMS board to stop it from being charged when it gets to its voltage, its max voltage. And then you'd have, this guy overheating and potentially catching on fire. So, I might go on eBay and see if I can buy one of these little BMS boards. But first, I'm going to unsolder it and then resolder it just to see if resetting power will reset the board. So this battery management circuit is bad. I purchased a replacement. I got actually 5 of them for $4.25 shipped. Now I have to break them off the circuit board and just use one. They're not the exact same size. You can see they're quite larger, probably better quality. They have more components at least. But they have the exact same general pinout of you have your battery minus and battery plus, which your battery minus and your battery minus and your battery plus, and we can solder either to the back or to the front there. So I'll hook those to the battery, and then we'll take the wires here and put those wires into the power plus and power minus. I'll probably solder the wires on first and then solder the battery on. Now you could just remove this entirely, solder the wires to the cell, and it would make this thing work, but then you risk having a problem. If the charger malfunctions and overcharges your cell, it could burst into fire. Okay, we have the battery, which has a new BMS board on it. I measured this as producing voltage, so let's test this guy. Make sure circuitry works. Alright, so battery's providing power. Now we just have to mechanically put everything back in place. And I am going to place the circuit board in here so that this plastic will kind of protect it. And then I'm going to tape the battery, this heat shrink tubing, back around the battery a little bit, just to keep it in place. And we need these 2 pieces of foam rubber because that's kind of the right size to keep the battery in the hilt of the lightsaber. Now I'm also going to put some tape along the bottom of this guy just to electrically isolate it, because that is a metal tube. It feels like aluminum, which is conductive. So I'm just going to throw some tape on the bottom of this guy so that I don't accidentally touch it against the tube as I'm putting it in. Then we just have to put everything back in place. So that guy just unscrews. We already have these 2 grub screws here hold the plastic lightsaber bit in. And then we will have to put this in with the button and charger facing up this way. And these grub screws here will hold it in place once I get it in. So I want to make sure they are unscrewed almost all the way to get this thing in place. Alright, let's start pushing stuff up. We're going to have these wires inside the grooves here so that the wires will not catch, hopefully. Pushing this guy up. I'm going to put the battery in before the speaker, so the speaker will be near the speaker holes, mostly because that's the way I found it. But I am going to put the battery in with this little bit here, in that orientation, so the wires can come around where the rest of this isn't. And if you're watching in the holes, you can see that stuff is moving up into place up here. But I have a problem that these 2 little grub screws were keeping it from going all the way up, so I'm going to move those out all the way. And catch them before they roll off. Also, I have a little bit of an issue here in that while I was twisting things around, my circuit board got twisted. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to spin that in place here. I might have to pull the whole thing out again. I don't like pulling on wires, but it doesn't seem like they are caught too badly, so that's good. Okay, so let's try putting this back in approximately the right orientation. So there goes my light. I'm trying to get that light far up here. I might need to take the plastic tube out to get that light far enough in, because it seems to be caught on something. So we're going to take out the plastic tube so I can access things from the top. So now at least I can see what I'm doing, and that light's pretty far away. It looks like it's caught on a little gap, so if I put something in there and push, I might be able to get it past that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now I have the light where it needs to be. It's right up against the end there. And the buttons are just about where they need to be. I can maneuver them by pushing on this guy a little bit. Nothing wrong with testing it before you put all the screws in. Alright, so let's put this guy back in. There are 2 divots in that plastic tube. There's one of them. I'm going to line that divot up to the grub screw. It doesn't really matter. If you put a grub screw into a place without the divot, you'd make a divot, so it would be alright, but might as well put it in the way it was to begin with. Okay, I can see the aluminum of the light bulb, or the LED assembly in there, so I can screw this into that to hold it into place. Let me do both sides equally as much as I can. Alright, I go reverse until it clicks, and then I can go forward. That one's in deeper than the other one, so I'm going to push the other one in a little more. Okay, now I have tension and they're about equally deep. That one's just slightly deeper. Okay, now all I need to do is get the button and the charger port into the right general locations here. So let me try pulling it down and pushing it back in a little bit. It's definitely moving freely in there. I'm going to use this guy to try to get a handhold I can move it around with. Alright, I'm going to try putting in the bottom one first, maybe doing them evenly. Alright, there we go, I got it in. Alright, great. So the button is flush where it's supposed to be. Lightsaber is working, which is the whole point of the exercise. Now I just need to get the speaker in here. And I have the battery connection plug in the speaker and this little O-ring, rubber O-ring here. I need to fit all that in here and yet still have the base screw arm. And I think it's going to have enough room here. There we go. I am a Jedi.